Thank you all for coming in and attending the presentation today. To be respectful of those of you who show up on time, we always start on time. And so just wanted to introduce our company to you briefly. We are PACE. PACE stands for Partners in Achieving Change Excellence. So we are a change management and operational excellence coaching company, not consulting, but coaching company. And what we specialize in is helping organizations just do what they do to their full potential. And our mission is to deliver practical solutions to as many organizations as possible. So we service two sectors. One is the human services sector, which a lot of you guys are from, and the other sector we service is the mining sector. And in the human services sector, especially in Canada, there's quite a few nonprofits, and so we really like to give back to the communities that we serve. And so our nonprofit rates are significantly different, and we do a lot of upskilling or capacity building work, which means that our whole methodology is building capacity in your organization, and that speaks to our mission and vision as well. So here are just a few companies that we work with. We can't list all of our clients on there, but we have 100% client retention rate, which is pretty amazing. Once people start working with us, they like to keep connected and go from there. It doesn't mean that we're billing them the whole time. It just means that we're connected, and whenever things come up, we help them out. This is on the human services side, and on the industrial side, these are the companies that we've trained so far. So Atlas Copco, we have a few others that are not listed up there as well. So I love this image. Joanna found it, and it just makes me laugh because the first time I saw it, it was just like, oh my God. So when they say, now analyze the data, how many of us just pick up and run, right? And a big challenge in the way that we're delivering our curriculum today as well is that, we can teach you all we can teach you in the classroom, but when you go back to your workplace, you really don't have access to the data that you're looking for to help you determine whether a problem that you're trying to solve is indeed a valid problem, or if it's a problem at all. So today's session is really focused around, the agenda is quite simple, right? It's starting with deciding on whether or not to collect data, because data collection is not necessarily worth it in certain circumstances, and how to collect data. You could go into a whole little explanation on that, but it's sort of getting you to the decision point to say, should you even try to collect data? And that's a good question. The other one is what to do prior to data collection. So if you do decide, yep, I do want to collect data, we will sort of give you some steps of as to what can you do prior to collecting the data. And then the third point, which is an important point, is how to do this well. And this webinar was inspired because we have quite a few Greenbelt students out there that are doing their best to collect data, and they create their forms and they go out there, and then when they bring the data back to me and they're analyzing it, they spend so much effort doing that. And so we thought, maybe it's a good thing to share sort of how we think we should be collecting data and how we actually should be. They're two different things. So I think that's really the big draw for this particular webinar is when you're thinking about data collection, there are the ways to do it and the ways not to do it, and some of them might seem counterintuitive. So that's what we're going to go through today. So just a quick audience question. What frustrates you most about collecting data? And maybe the answers that we're showing you don't actually, I don't know if the audience question is up there, Joanna. Just making sure it's up there. Because I only see my slide up there. I don't see the audience question.
This is not a poll question. This is for the audience to type in the question
Oh,
box.
it's not a poll question. Sorry about that. There you go. All right. So this is the one to type in just in the question box. The poll is not actually up there. Thank you for reminding me about that. So what frustrates you most about collecting data? And I see Kelsey, great point, not having data readily available. Carly says, overwhelming amount of data that's collected and not everyone consistently tracking the information. Very, very good point, Carly. That's in our digital transformation practice that we have, that's a huge problem. People not sending it in time, not adhering to deadlines that we need to meet. Good point. Absolutely. You know, Harold, I would say if that's your biggest problem, you're doing well because you actually have people giving you data. So that's, definitely not sending it in time is an issue. But I'm like, yay, someone's actually sending you data. Unsure if the database is splitting out proper data, not trusting it. Good point. Not, garbage in, garbage out, right? Not knowing how to ask the question or to get the data you're needing. Ah, Cheryl, brilliant point, right? Not knowing how to ask the question. It's like, what is the answer you're looking for? What is the problem you're trying to solve, right? And that's a brilliant point, Cheryl. That's a huge part of proper data collection, which is knowing how to ask the right question. I'm not going to go into detail on it because there is sort of the A3 training that goes into detail to help you formulate how to ask the right question, but it's a brilliant point because if you don't know what you're trying to solve, then you end up going in circles collecting data. And so those are really, really good points. I'm sure we could go on and on for a while in chatting about it. And not asking leading questions. Fantastic point, Kyle, is not asking the questions to get you to where you're getting the data. So those are all brilliant points. Thank you so much, everybody, for participating. I really appreciate it. And as things come up, I will sort of focus on it. So just so you know, I've put my question screen away because I do have just a bit of non-diagnosed attention deficit disorder. So I have to sort of keep myself focused at times. Where is it? Let's go to the next screen. So common issues is data can't be manipulated. There's overwhelming amount of data. It isn't entered consistently, and data is missing. So it just simply doesn't exist, right? So that's a big part of our challenges. We're saying data simply does not exist. There's too much of it, don't know what to do with it. We can't really trust it because we don't know if people are entering it properly, and it can't be manipulated. So you can imagine that if you wanted to set up a command center or something that sort of collected all of your data and get this going, how overwhelming of a job it would be. Today, we're not going to discuss the command center thought, but today we are going to discuss just on a project basis, how can you ensure you're collecting data well for a particular problem that you're trying to solve? All right, going from there. So the question is, why do you need to collect data, right? So if you're not getting the expected results to do something, that's why you need to collect data. So data collection, basically, data helps you determine whether something that you've changed has made the impact that you're seeking to make, right? So when you actually make a change, you need to objectively prove, oh, the change was indeed an improvement. And the only way to prove that the change was indeed an improvement is with objective facts, which ends up being data. So you do need to use data as evidence, right? You can also use data to better describe the problem. So if you say, you know what, actually, I'll use a really simple example. A while ago, one of our project coordinators at the office were saying, oh my God, my computer crashes all the time. And we are like, wow, really? And she says, yeah, it crashes all the time. And I said, so how many times a day does it crash on average? And she says, at least 10 to 12 times. And I said, okay, so why don't you just take a piece of paper and document how often, every time it crashes, just make a note of it, you know? And she says, okay. And then she starts making her notes, and sure enough, her computer is crashing, but it crashes about twice a day, right? So the impact of her problem, so I think twice a day is still a lot for a computer to crash. That was unacceptable, so we have to replace her computer anyways. But using data to better define the problem, why do you think there was such a big gap? So I'm going to ask this audience question. Why do you think there was such a big gap in what she perceived the issue to be to what the issue actually was? Can anybody help me answer that question? So the question is, when we were asking, when we said, when somebody's reporting the data, they're sort of doing that's right, they're doing a hyperbole of what they think the data is versus what the data actually is. So thank you, Robert. The observer bias is what Robert says. The effect is caused on her and her inability to get her task completed. That's right, Darcy. Subjective perception, fantastic. So thank you for being a very engaged audience. I appreciate all of you, Charles, Darcy, Robert, and everybody else that's been reporting in. It's subjective perception, right? So when it does happen, it is so frustrating to poor Jody that she's sort of, it's all she can think of. So it feels like it's taken up a lot more of her time. It's happened more often than it actually has happened. So sometimes you need data to better describe the problem, right? So that's an important point. And you need data to better describe the goal. So if you wanted to improve something, you would need to say, say it was a cycle time reduction, just typically reducing time to serve clients or what have you, right? So we say, we want to serve, we want to be able to deliver this particular service to a client within, 48 hours of them approaching us, right? That could be a goal. And, we want, currently our percentage of serving those clients is, we could say, currently we only serve 20% of clients within 48 hours. We want to up it to 80% of our clients. And that's a goal. That's sort of a, in terms of you want to actually have numbers in what you're doing. That's one example of it. Or currently it takes you 2 hours to do something. You want to reduce that cycle time down to 40 minutes or what have you. So that could be another example of a goal. So you need data, you need to collect, you need to get a baseline to do all these different types of things. You need it if you need it as evidence. You need it if you want to better describe the problem. You need it if you want to better describe the goal. So those are three situations in which you collect data. Can you guys think of other situations in which you would want to collect data? If there's anybody that has any, like if there's something I'm missing, that's saying, is there other situations in which you might want to actually collect data? Because this is a really good session for us to sort of share knowledge with each other, right? To say, the whole group listening in. So I haven't got any notes back, so I'm going to assume, test a hypothesis. Great point, Robert. If you wanted to test a hypothesis, you're right. You want, if you have a hypothesis, and it could also fall into the category, right, Robert, of better describing the goal or using data as evidence, right? So you could say you need a baseline. You need data to do anything to move forward, right? So, but not, data collection, the effort of data collection is not always worth the outcome, right? So points to help decide on data collection. So you could go days and days, and you could spend all kinds of time collecting data, and actually we do. We do that all the time. People get asked for the health card numbers when the health card numbers do absolutely nothing in certain circumstances, and I know a lot of the community service organizations are quite familiar with it. But the points to help decide on data collection, the first point is the effort of collecting the data versus the impact of collecting the data. So I'll give you an example. If I wanted to make a if I wanted to make a decision on, how many people in the office, like if I had an office of 500 staff and I wanted to think about what's the average commute time to work, right? What's the average commute time? And I wanted to get data on that. Now, I don't need that information with very high precision accuracy because maybe I'm collecting data because I'm implementing a work from home program and I just want to advertise, on average it takes most people 45 minutes to travel to work, or I wanted to advertise that number and I kind of want to have some data around that number, but I certainly don't want to survey 500 of my staff and ask them, hey, how long does it take you to travel to work? So that's an effort impact dilemma, right? So your data collection effort in this case, if you were going to survey 500 of your staff, and even if it took them a minute to fill it out, that's 500 minutes that you just spend from your organization's productivity time to collect that data. You don't really want to be doing that, right? And very likely people are not going to respond. One of the things I learned, and this is an example that I learned in another webinar by Doug Hubbard, and Doug Hubbard is the author of the book How to Measure Anything. So if you guys are data collection geeks out there, write the name of the book down, and maybe Joanna just post the name of the book in the chat window as well. It's called How to Measure Anything by Doug Hubbard. And he really gives you some really good pointers on decision-making criteria, on what type of data or how much data you need to collect to inform what type of decision. So in this example that I just provided you, which is, estimating commute time for your organization of 500 people, Doug says your accuracy for how close you need the data to be would be just as good if you just picked up the phone, picked 5 random people, right? Totally randomly picked 5 people and just asked them, hey, how long does it take you to travel to work? Your accuracy would not be significantly different for what you need it for, right? It's not a life or death situation. You kind of need it for, basic analysis and things like that. So that's an example of making sure your effort of collecting data is not more than the impact, because effort also could be cost, right? If the cost of collecting data does not equal the cost of, the benefit of the impact, you shouldn't be doing it, really. Find another way to do it, and find a cheaper way or an easier way to do it to reduce that effort down to still get the data that you're looking for. So that's one of the things. Very important to remember that. Second, it has to inform a decision. We in the human services industry are fantastic at collecting data for data's sake. Like we just collect, and and it's because the ministry wants it, right? And it's not that we don't have enough data, we just have too much of it sometimes, right? So if you are going to go through a data collection activity, it has to inform a decision. So very important question to ask before you collect data is, what decision is it going to help you inform, right? What is that question you're trying to answer with that data? And so I'm going to use the same example that I just used about, commute time, right? If you thought about the impact of it, it really wasn't going to help inform any decision. It was just going to help sort of update a newsletter, and it was going to help sort of share some facts and figures into how much time employees might potentially save in data collection activities, right? So if it doesn't inform a decision, don't spend a lot of time in collecting it, or don't collect it. Like, why collect it if it's not actually going to inform a decision? So those are the two reasons, on 2 ways to decide on whether or not to collect data. And I see some notes coming through here. So why don't you guys tell me, how would you decide on whether or not to collect data? What is the reason? Oh, so Cheryl had said something about to use data to identify gaps. That is also better describing the problem. Yeah, that's a good point, Cheryl. That was a really good point. Susie actually just posted the PDF version of the How to Measure Anything book. Thanks, Susie. I'm not sure if we should share it at this point. I just want to make sure I ask Doug before I share it publicly. Just want to get his permission. Oh, we shared it already. So, all right. So I'm just gonna make sure we let Doug know, because I don't know if that was, I'm sure if it's available from the forleadership.org website, it probably is okay. But just wanted to double check on that before before we shared that. All right, so the question that I'm asking you guys is, how would you decide on whether or not to collect data? Is there any situation in which you would collect data? Is there any situation in which you wouldn't collect data? You're welcome, Nicole. Is there a pending decision? That's a good point. If there is a pending decision, that's when you would decide to collect or not collect data. So those are some points, because I know I couldn't think of many others, but if I just leave the question open to you guys, so if you come up with something, I will come back to the question window and look at it at a later point. So continuing on in my presentation, how would you decide whether or not to collect data? Right? That's the question I just finished asking. And so the next piece that I'm going to go into is sort of just high-level steps for data collection. So those are important pieces. So before I move to the high-level steps, the first thing I want to make sure that I'm clearly stating is that make sure that the effort versus the impact, the cost of the data collection, does not outweigh the benefit of the data collection. That's really important to know. Make sure the data is actually informing a decision and document the decision that you're looking at. Those are two things to definitely make sure prior to jumping into your data collection activity, right? Norm Rudd, one of our director of knowledge exchange, who I just spent 3 days with in Toronto, which is fantastic. He always says, in God we trust, and all others bring data. Actually, you know what? We make buttons with those. So Joanna and Sherry will probably make sure to give out buttons for those who've been participating in the poll. We'll pick 3 people and mail out that button to those 3 people. It says, "In God we trust, and all others bring data." And I absolutely love that statement. Okay. So if you decide, yep, we're going to go ahead, collect data. We understand the effort does not outweigh the impact. And we also understand that it's going to inform a decision, right? You have to start with selecting the type of data that you're looking to collect, right? And there is I think I'll email you this. We have actually a full chapter on a detailed step-by-step guide. Joanna, did I actually get you that step-by-step guide out of our Brown Belt book? No, eh?
No, I don't have it.
Okay, so I will make sure that you guys get the step-by-step guide on, selecting the type of data. So how do you actually go about selecting the type of data? And if you're actually assessing the data capture point, so selecting the type of data. Let me start with a simple example that would really hit home for you guys. So I'm going to use a current example. This is going to be a little bit of a medical example, but hopefully it translates to other areas. So we have a project that someone's working on where they're looking to understand causes of medication errors, right? So just understanding in hospitals or long-term care homes sometimes, there are medication errors that happen which have to be documented on a regular basis. So we have to first decide, well, what type of data are we looking to collect, right? So you select the type of data that you're looking for. In this case, it's sort of, you know, what will help us inform the decision is what is the problem you're trying to solve, right? So the problem that we're trying to solve is, in this case, was to reduce the number of medication errors as a result of rushed med passes. So there's some hospitals where it just gets really busy, not enough resources, and med passes are very, very rushed, right? So we said, okay, let's select, you know, the type where we're talking about where the med passes are not in a, you know, not happening, are happening because things are very rushed. Sorry, I rambled on there for a bit. Okay, and then assess the data capture point. So it's kind of saying like, where would you actually collect this data from, right? So in that particular example, you could collect the data from several sources. One of them being the actual when they're actually reporting the error, right? At that point, they would get a trigger to say, okay, you need to report on, you know, whether the cause of it was related to, you know, you being rushed or what have you, right? So that's the assessing where you actually capture that information, or if you're actually going to be in the workplace. You define the sample size, so you understand how long do you need to collect this data for, right? So do you need to collect this data for, you know, 2 weeks to get a good idea? Do you need to collect it for 6 months? You know, what is that period of time that's a valid period of time for you to work with? And when we're talking about defining the sample size, it's really important to remember that, so for example, actually, Kelly, who couldn't be on this call, I'll give you a simpler example, was looking at invoice errors. So things, you know, invoicing errors that went wrong. And she did data collection for us, and she captured the data over a 1 week period. And in that 1 week period, you know, she said, oh, these are all the errors from all these different sites. And so we said, okay, Kelly, that's great. And then Kelly says, do you want me to continue recording this? And I said, yeah, I do, because, you know, that 1 week period may not have been representative, or it may have been over representative based on your invoicing cycles or what have you. So defining your sample size has to be directly proportional to what cycles you're in, right? So if you're in certain invoicing cycles, or, you know, if it's Christmas time and you really have very, very short staff, so you have more rushed med errors, right? Maybe that is the right time to collect data, maybe it's not. But those are only intelligent questions you can answer, because you are the subject matter expert. So we don't pretend to answer those questions. We're just giving you the methodology. You need to look at your own system and then just decide on how you're collecting that. And then understand the definitions of the data. So when we say like rushed med pass, what does that even mean, right? So you need to define that very clearly as to what a rushed med pass would consist of, and clarifying that and going from there. And then define the data capture method. Like, are you just going to use the simplest data capture method? Because people always think, oh my God, we got to use this computer system, and I don't know how to use Excel, and, you know, that kind of stuff. Pen and paper, man, pen and paper. Simplest thing, leave it by the desk where you're collecting data. Make a really simple report, and that's the data capture method, right? Just record it on pen and paper, and I'll show you in a second how to sort of build that in a second. And then do the actual data collection and get to the analyzing of the data. Now, doing the actual data collection, if you have it done right, is important, because I will show you where people make a little bit of a mistake when they're collecting data, and why it sucks for analysis when you're not doing it properly. If you are a data geek, you understand it, it's fine. But if you're not, it's a difficult transition, right? So I'm just gonna make sure I review sort of where this data collection fits into the A3 problem-solving methodology, right? So why am I really talking about this? So the A3 problem-solving methodology is sort of what all of our training is based on, how we do our consulting, how we all, every pacer, everyone that works with PACE is called a pacer, thinks in the A3 format, right? It's based on the plan, do, check, act cycle. And really, it's there to make an improvement to your process. So once you go through the plan, do, check, act, in the check phase, right? So in the plan and the check phase, you sort of need to have data because you have to know, this is what I'm intending on doing, right? This is the result I'm looking for. That's Robert, you talking about validating assumptions. That's important. So this is what I'm assuming I will get out of it. Then I actually do something. I take an action, and when I check it, I need data to compare. Right? Did it actually work for me? Did it not actually work for me? And so when a cycle is completed, your improved process is the starting point for the next cycle of improvements. So then that way, you always know where you stand. And it doesn't mean that if you have a hypothesis of making a change, that you're actually going to make an improvement. If you don't make an improvement, it's amazing. It's failing, right? And you want to fail fast. The best organizations right now are failing fast. We just came back from a very exciting trip to Nevada, and I have a picture. I should have put that in the presentation of this wall in an innovation center. It was actually at Code Mine. It's not a mine. It's like a hub. It's an innovation hub for Barrick Gold. And over there, they had this wall called the failure wall, the fail fast wall. And people were encouraged to post sort of things that they tried and they failed at. So the data collection and the plan, do, check, act is there so that you could potentially fail fast if you're going to fail because you try something, it doesn't work, you now know it doesn't work. Or you look at situations under which it would have worked if things were different, right? But either way, you learn from it. So it fits into the A3 methodology really, really well. And, before you collect data, make sure that you understand the process. So you're actually walking the process to understand where you can actually do the data collection effectively. You're actually drawing out the process. This is a little process map to verify actual versus designed people movement, right? So you actually understand where the information is coming in, and then you're actually collecting the data, which is the end result, right? Is getting to that point of data collection itself. So data collection is tricky business because we think that we need to collect data in a pretty format to get it to in the first place, but that's not true. So for example, I don't know if you guys can see my screen. Just want to make sure you can see my screen. Yeah, you can see my screen. Okay. So, for example, if I show you sheet, I'm going to call this sheet B, which is the colorful sheet, versus sheet A. Which sheet do you think is the correct way to collect data? So I have sheet A. Hold on, let me open up sheet A, all of them. And then I have sheet B. Which is the correct sheet? Just answer it in the question window. Okay, if you answer sheet A versus sheet B, I also want you to tell me why do you think sheet A is correct? Okay, I have some votes coming in for one of them. I'm not going to say who's saying what, but I'm just going to observe. Okay, how many of you vote for, no, this is sheet B, and this is sheet A. So the colorful one or the not so colorful one? And I made it colorful for a reason. So some people say sheet B is the correct sheet, which is this one. Yeah. Sheet B is easier to read. Good point. Absolutely. It is easier to read, for sure. Lots of people bringing in sheet B. And there is a correct and an incorrect answer here, unfortunately. And I'll explain why when I get to it. Sheet A. Okay. All right, so I will get back into it. All right, so we got a few data geeks there, and you know, that's cool. All right, so the correct answer of what kind of data sheet is the correct way to collect data is sheet A. This is sheet A, and that's the correct way to collect data. Not because it's less colorful, but because it's in a format that makes it easier to analyze the data. So what's wrong with sheet 1 here is that, you know, if I wanted to identify, for example, the type of item here says medium, small. I'm going to make this bigger so you can see it. I know it's probably very, very small for you guys. Okay. So what's wrong is the type of item is, you know, I have all the different types of items listed here, the revenue and the expenses and the length. On the other sheet, I have only the medium items sold. So say, for example, if I was doing the medication errors, I would say, you know, as a result of this problem, these are all the medication errors. So you would actually categorize them physically, and there's a lot of physical manipulation that happens. Some people would like to add in sort of a title right in the middle here, you know, to make it easier to read, because you're right, it is much easier to read, right? So we'll say, you know, other items or something like that. So they would put it this way, make it all pretty like, right? And then maybe we add in another row over here. You catch my drift. So this is the traditional, like the most common way a lot of people use Excel, right? That haven't been a lot of training and things in Excel. So then you would say, you know, orange items, small, or something like that. So that's, and you're right, it is easier to read, and it happens like it looks this way. But the challenge with this is there's only one way to read it, right? If you wanted to do a calculation on sort of, you know, total revenue or things like, if you wanted to do some like how many medium items versus small items versus long items, you wouldn't be able to do that because it's just sort of, you know, all bunched into one. So that's sheet 1, and I'll show you. I'll actually show you a demo so you can see what I mean by that. So if I wanted to get a pretty little graph or a pretty little picture, now this is where you guys can open up your Excel sheet or come back and review this little video. And I promise you, this is not the best pivot table video on the internet. I will promise you that, because, you know, I'm sure there's other good ones out there. But whenever I ask someone to do a pivot table, and whenever you go to an interview and somebody says, can you do pivot tables, people get nervous, right? And I'll show you how simple it is to do a pivot table. That's my point here today. So if I go insert and I go pivot table, right? I select the data area. So this automatically selected, I can just go like this. So it's selected the table range. And then I can go put it into a new worksheet, right? So where do you want? I want to put it into a new worksheet. Okay. It goes into a new worksheet. Now people are sort of going, oh my God, this looks really complicated, right? But really, it isn't, right? So if I wanted to have the type of items and what is the average, like the total length of the membership for each items, I could just drop that there. So I'm just going to put this back up here. This area on the pivot table is summation of values. So you're actually able to do different calculations on it. So if I wanted to see by item, what was the total revenue that we received? I can put the revenue there, and that's the total revenue that we've received. Yes, it would make it prettier if we were going to organize this by dollar figure. I'm just going to make it bigger a little bit for you guys so you can see it, right? So you can actually, you know, see the total revenue by item type. So big, medium, small, grand total. That's actually very, very easy to do. If I wanted to see the total expenses, right, you could see sum of revenue, sum of expenses by item type. So what is the revenue and the expenses? Now, if I wanted to make a pretty little graph out of this, so I am going a little fast, I'm going to slow down a little bit. What I did is I'm going to put this back up here and put this back up here. So I said, obviously there are the different item types that I want details for. So I took the item type, dumped it in here in the columns area. Make this a little bigger. Oh, it doesn't make it become bigger for you. But in the corner in the columns area, I put the type of item. And I'm now interested in answering the question, because your data should be answering a question, how much revenue did I make by item type? I just pulled the revenue piece and I put it in here. Boom. It just gives me a calculation of the revenue type. And I said, maybe I want to know the expenses as well. Take the expenses, drop it in there, boom. I know the expenses for each item type, right? Now, if I wanted to make this a pivot table, a pivot chart, make it prettier than a pivot table, I could insert, let's see, go back here. Where is my pivot chart function? Oh, there we go, pivot chart. I could insert a pivot chart, right? Item type, listed. Revenue, listed. Boom. What did that take me? I would say like less than 30 seconds, huh? That didn't take me very long at all. Expenses, boom, listed right there, right? If you want to show data, you probably have to, do your Excel stuff and make sure that you're actually showing the data labels and things like that. So adding data labels so you can see the numbers and things. So this gives me, the reason you put things more visually, right, is so that it could help you make decisions really quickly. So you can tell immediately the blue is the big one, the orange is the medium one, and the gray is the small one. So we make most of our revenue from our small items, it seems like. So it helps us make decisions faster, right? If we wanted to see the length of membership and take out the revenue, we could see that the small items have the longest cumulative membership. Now, here's a trick, because sometimes you don't always want to do a total, right? You can actually go to this thing called value field settings, and you can change it to different things. So you can actually do an average of, the length of membership if you want. So you go, okay, interesting. So the average length of membership for the big items is longer. So the average length of membership is 60, and then followed by medium versus the small. So it helps you answer different questions, right? So if I just wanted to see, what is our longest staying clients, where they stand. May not be a big difference when you're answering that question. Or you want to say, which line of business generates the most revenue? I will get rid of this average length of business, put the revenues in there, and you'll see that. If I wanted to suggest which line of business generates the most expenses, plop it in there, and it's equal. I could compare revenue and expenses together. And this is not a very easy one to see, but, comparatively, they're not too far apart. So if you were overwhelmed with data collection, I hope this makes it a little bit easy for you. And simple rules for data collection, I'll go back to the correct sheet here, is that everything that you're collecting needs to be in a column. So you need to have your field type written up here. This is the type of item. So if you have several different types of item, just make sure you enter it consistently. In this case, they were medium, small, and big. So we've entered them consistently. This is a really ugly sheet to look at, right? Right off the bat. I'm not going to, sugarcoat it, but this is the best way to give you the most amount of information that you need. So if you decide to do data collection because you have a whole bunch of forms, right, available to you which already have this data. So in that medication errors example, we did have a whole bunch of medication error forms already, right, that had the data on it. So you need to first set up your Excel sheet properly so you know you're going to be able to pull the data out. Now, you might say, yeah, I don't believe you. I think I can pull data from here. Okay, let's see if I can. But I haven't done this before, so it's kind of like risky, eh? I'm even trying it. Select a table range. Let's see. Oh, it is working. Maybe I didn't mess it up enough. Length of membership. Oh, it's not, because it's giving me less information. Okay, no, it is not working. There you go. So you see when it's over here, it doesn't tell me, I can't do a comparison in this particular area, right, with the different types of items or anything. And you can see the revenue, expenses, and length of membership is there. I actually hadn't tried this, so I'm glad it's not working, because then it's proving my point, right? Is the revenue, expenses is there, but it's not getting you like the comparators that you need, right? Versus in this particular one, you can say, the big items, the medium items, and small items, what are the revenues, what are the expenses, and how do we go about doing that? And literally, you can take a little screenshot and plop it into a presentation. And this little piece of data, 4 columns, can give you several different charts to represent the data in multiple different formats. So if I went through it too quickly, you can definitely view the video again so that you're able to sort of see it and go from there. But long story short, make sure that the data that you're collecting is very cleanly identified with a heading, and it has the details underneath it. If you're going to have common themes, name them the same way. So small, always call it small, spell it the same way, that kind of stuff, right? Make sure the columns are proper. So don't put a $ in front of it or anything. These are number fields. So if I go here and I go format cells, this should be, this one says general, but ideally it's a number field, and you go from there, right? And don't put letters where letters don't belong. Put your date formats correctly and things like that. And that will give you a lot more information for you to be able to do effective data analysis, right? This is by no means a database administrator course. I'm doing this for the layman who struggles with data collection, or who don't think they struggle, but there is a struggle there. There's lots of possibilities for you to manipulate your data and to represent it in all kinds of different ways. So that's our little demo for today in terms of the pivot tables. So you can actually do, you can actually take your data, and if you collect it properly, only if you collect it properly, so only if you collect it in the format that doesn't look very user-friendly, right? You can take this and you can convert it into pretty-looking charts and graphs to be able to give it to your leadership teams, or to share it with your coworkers, or what have you. All right, so I'm just going to take a pause for a second and just ask for comments or questions if anybody has any comments or questions coming up. One of the data fields has to be a label field to create meaningful tables and charts, right? One of the data fields. Good question, Robert. So I'm just going to go back to the sheet. Yeah, so in this case, I think you mean like the type of item was a label, right? So it's like, you know, is what type of item. It doesn't have to be a label field, but it could be whatever type, whatever you're entering in. So for example, here, if I call this color, if I had items color, right? So I could do like blue, red, yellow, blue, green. I could add different item colors. So it's not necessarily a label field, it's just a descriptor field. So you kind of want to do this as much as you can. So it's all entered consistently, and you can do analysis in different ways. So if I wanted to do analysis by color, this is going to help me do analysis by color. And I'm going to do this quickly for you because I'm an Excel whiz. Well, kind of. Not that great of a whiz, but I can figure things out, usually. So, there, delete. Okay, so if I entered it in, if I now entered a new field here, right, in my data collection activity, I can go back to, where am I? To my pretty sheet here. Important thing to note is you can go back, and when you go to data, you have to reselect where the data comes from. So this, you see the new field has not showed up here. It's because you need to actually get new data from here, right? So I'll go back to my X3 sheet and go insert, do another pivot chart. I can do a pivot chart and pivot table. And then it now selects all of them. And so I could do an analysis by color now. So it's not, so color could be considered a label, right? But that's basically it, is that it could be any descriptor that you're looking for. And then you could do it by type of item. You can do an analysis by type of item as well. So I'll take, this is an interesting representation. So this is why it's called pivot tables and pivot charts. So I don't think you can see it here, but I'll make it bigger so you can see it. So in here, you can see there is the blue, so I can see how many big blue items did I sell, how many big green items did I sell, how many big red items did I sell. That's how this works. And if I just wanted to look at just that data, I can actually enter the type of item as a filter as well in the filter field. And I'm going to go find our table, make this smaller for you. Not too small. There we go. Okay, so in this case, I could just look for all the medium items, how many blue, green, red, or yellow did I sell? Now, of course, it would help if we had made sure the colors matched here, right? That would be more visual. So you can see that I sold for the medium items, I sold very few green items, but mostly red items and yellow items. So that's pretty much a label field, if you were to call it. You can add any, I've just shown you about 4 different fields. You can add as many as you like in terms of, you know, field types. But it's really important to have your data in a clean format, no breaks. So don't add any inserts and things like that, because you're going to lose out on the rest of the data. and it will look ugly when you start with it, and it's not easy to understand or easy to read, but you can only make it easy to understand or easy to read in a very flexible format in any way you want if you actually collect it this way. So that's the biggest lesson that I want all of our students to take away from this, from anyone that's looking to collect any kind of data to take away, is that just do your data collection in a way where you can actually analyze it, where you can actually do something with it. Because Excel is a wonderful tool and it lets you do a lot of fancy decorating and things like that, but the real power of Excel is in that next level of analysis, which is using pivot tables and pivot charts. So that's the point of sort of the demo today that I made sure to give you. So I'm at 1:56, so I'm almost done our presentation, but I will take questions if any questions are coming up. So we showed you how not to collect data. So how not to collect data is by putting breaks in your Excel sheet. If you're putting a break in your Excel sheet, that should be a trigger, not to collect the data. It's not that you're not allowed to make it pretty and colorful and things like that. Just don't put different breaks and things like that, right? If you put breaks and stuff, you're losing out on the rest of the data. Remember, you're making a break in the actual data. That's one of the ways to remember how not to collect the data. If you have a title on your sheet, that messes things up too. Not always, but try not to have a title like this in the sheet. Delete that. Make sure that your column headings are your column headings, and the table view automatically picks up your column headings. So make sure they make sense and things like that. How to collect it is definitely in a format where it has a column heading and it has the details below written in consistent formats as you're going under below. And how to pivot it. So I showed you how to pivot it. A recap again is you go in here and you go insert and you go to pivot chart, and you can select pivot chart and pivot table, and it automatically typically selects, but you can go like this and select all the columns that you collect the data in, like that. Click on new worksheet and click on OK, and off you go. So it's really, really simple, especially if you can come back and watch this again. And the purpose of this presentation was not to show you, give you a tool of like getting you the best pivot table video. It was really to show you that it's possible. I don't want you guys to get overwhelmed and run away when we tell you to collect data. So that's pretty much the point of the presentation today, and I really, really appreciate everybody attending. We have more webinars coming up. We're starting our mining series webinar, and so Ken Schroeder will be doing a webinar with us on Tuesday, November 28th, and it's around gaining process stability in underground mining. So he's part of our mining series, and we have quite a few people coming in our mining series. So our healthcare folk might be wondering right now, what are you guys doing in mining? I thought you guys were healthcare people. You're right, we are healthcare people, and that's where we started. But interesting tidbit, we have about 80% of our workforce comes from mining, and we just never really use their talents where they actually belong. So the relationship between the work that we do in healthcare and mining, and the reason I'm in Thunder Bay, is we work with a lot of the mining companies, and part of our corporate social responsibility is giving back to the healthcare community. So our rates for the healthcare community are much lower than they are for the for-profit sector. We openly advertise that, as you can see on this webinar, and we know that a lot of rural health, right? So, and I don't mean rural as in absolutely rural, but it's sort of, mines are located in non-urban areas. So mines are not located in Toronto, although I'm here in Toronto. I got to be in Toronto and talk to corporate people. But mines are located in, usually in rural areas. So I have to go through Thunder Bay to get to Marathon to help people out over there. And what we do with the mining sector is a lot of digital transformation, which we've already done in the healthcare sector, and change management. And they don't believe me when I say that change management in mining is a cakewalk for us, because we got awards in healthcare for it. They don't believe me, you know. It's like it's a pretty easy gig when it comes to doing mining change management, because we've cut our teeth in healthcare, and you guys have taught us well, right? So that's really our relationship between mining and the human services sector. We have a lot of experience in the human services sector, and this is a way that we give back to the human services sector. If you can't necessarily afford our services or our training, which if you are a private sector organization is covered through the Canada Ontario Job Grant, but if you can't afford it, we give you little tidbits of information. And also, if you're a student of ours, we want to keep you up to date on what's going on and how you can do your jobs better, right? So that's really our goal at the end of the day. So thank you, everybody, for attending. Really, really appreciate your time, and definitely sign up for our upcoming webinars as you go through. Really, thank you very, very much. You know, I understand your time is very valuable, and we appreciate that you spent the time with us today, right? So let us know if you have any feedback. We'll send you a little survey as well in terms of how we could have made this better and more interesting for you, and we'll go from there. We'll see if there's any thank you, Nicole. We'll see if there's any other topics that you have. Definitely submit those, and we will make sure we design something for you guys specifically and go from there. Thanks, Harold. All right, so Joanna, are we good to go then?
Yes, great job. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. Take care. Bye-bye.